So it was November 21 that I shared a definition of creativity on the platform. And this Australian guy came in and he told me I was wrong. And I said, okay, fine. And I went and I adjusted it. And then he came back and he said he was wrong again. And I was a little miffed, but now I know that that experience was part of how I got to Linky Land. Good day, everybody, and welcome to, I think this is episode 12 of the podcast. My name is Tony Albrecht, and in Linky Land is a pod about the power of creating and connecting on LinkedIn. Today is another relaxed fit episode from me featuring Christopher Sellers and Travis Hinkle, two of my brethren in the LinkedIn creativity circle. We're a rather small, esoteric bunch of creators whose content tends to focus on the creative process itself, on creativity, on why it matters, on why we're so bad at it, on how to get better at it. I wrote a book on the subject called In the Creative Arena that came out in September. You might have run across it. Thank you to everybody who's picked up a copy. But Christopher Sellers also has a book on this subject, Applied Creativity, just came out at the end of November, and it's available on Amazon. And I want to say something that's in Australia that I had never heard of before he said it, but I've got my hands on the ebook already. He's got an audiobook coming out momentarily that I will be jumping on. And I've heard something about a signed copy that intends to make its way around the world. We have yet to see that materialize. But Christopher's a great thinker on creativity and its importance. And his book is about 6 creative skill sets that we need more of. Travis is good dude. I've referred to both these gentlemen as my LinkedIn doppelgangers. I think Travis probably is a little more so, in that I feel like we have a number of posts that really could have been written by one another. Like either one of us could have written it. He's out of near Memphis, creative graphic designer. In this episode, we get into our experiences with LinkedIn, our experience, discovering Linky Land and coming to be friends in that little space, and kind of how our interactions with one another and with the platform as a whole have shaped how this year has unfolded, where Travis got a new job through LinkedIn in a way that was, for me, an example of what I mean when I say that at this point, LinkedIn is my resume. That, if I needed a job tomorrow, I wouldn't go apply for 50 jobs. I would tap my network. And I know that that's tough and that there are people for whom that's not working well. And I feel you. That's just a feeling I have about how the ground has shifted from how I used to think about how you get a job, which is not to say that it's not a tough environment out there right now. I think that's enough out of me. I'm sick right now as I'm recording this. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for being here. Chris, Travis, thank you for doing this. You two are not just two of the gentlemen who've been Linky Land friends of mine since 2021, way back when we were little newbie creators. But you're also two people who occupy or have occupied similar corners on the internet to mine in the creativity space. So thank you both for being here. And let's start off with quick introductions. Who you are, where you're coming from, and what it is you write about or care about when it comes to what you do on LinkedIn. Travis.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Tony. It's always fun to get on and talk with other creators and other creatives. And man, as far as LinkedIn goes, this all started for me back in February. I knew I was going to be quitting my job soon. Nobody else knew that at the time, but I hopped on here. I figured I'd better start building up my digital resume and you know make some connections, start applying for jobs. And so I was still viewing that how you mentioned it before, Tony. It's an online resume. It's all about finding a job, getting a job, announcing our new jobs. And so that's what I was doing. And as I got on here, I started to find people were posting. I guess you could say we're starting to post similar to what you see on other social media platforms. It wasn't just the job announcements and changes and stuff like that. And so I was a little interested about that. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll start throwing some content out there and making connections beyond just who could get me a job or something like that. And so it's been a wild ride since then, just to see what looks like a sudden explosion of community and creativity and just all these things that you can now find on LinkedIn. And it still baffles me that there's people out there who aren't connected to the people that are creating this online content. They still view LinkedIn in the old way, and their feeds reflect that. But if you look for it, it's not too hard to find this amazing community. And so, man, that's just one of the things that's blown me away is how it looks like LinkedIn has just come alive after being around for 20 plus years, and all of us just letting our accounts sit dormantly in the background.
Yeah.
So that has been fun.
Did we not connect until February?
It was somewhere around there. And actually, Sam Brown connected us. I was thinking it was the other way around. I thought I connected with you first and then found Sam. But Sam hit me up in DMs one day. He's like, I think you need to know Tony, my buddy Tony. And he's doing a lot of cool stuff here on LinkedIn. And so we connected. And I think probably it was a little bit later than that that Chris and I connected. But yeah, it's just been amazing. Some of the community and some of the connections that have been made since then.
Right on. And you're coming from where you're around Memphis, right?
I'm in Mississippi, just outside of Memphis. So yeah, mid South.
Hey, Chris, how about you?
I'm a little bit further south.
Yes, indeed.
A little bit. Just a little bit across the Atlantic and the Southern Hemisphere. So I'm in Sydney, Australia. And Tony, thanks for finally having us on and being here and being pals, and Travis as well. So a little bit about me. Yeah, I guess I need to find a sexier moniker than expert on creativity. But basically, that's what I write and talk and work about. Like if creativity is in demand, and we all know it is, but when it's expounded in the powers that be of Forbes and LinkedIn and CNBC, then then where is it and why don't we have it? And then how do we get it practically? Because whatever we're doing at the moment obviously isn't working, right? And I think that's a pretty big, I think we all agree it's a pretty big problem. It's multidimensional, it's got a lot of facets, and that's what we all talk about in different ways. That's how Tony and I met originally. I think that was in the post. Like Tony's like, here's my definition of creativity, and then we had a bit of discussion about that. And that was in almost a year, just over a year. Be very, very close to a year to the day. And I have a sneaking suspicion in terms of timelines that I met Tony, but then I bumped into Sam later, and not that it really, really matters, but it's all in the mix. And then Travis, we crossed paths somewhere along the way, and then funnily enough, I brought Travis in to work with me on my book in terms of being a graphic designer. So he designed my cover, which was amazing. So yeah, that's how we all know each other.
Travis, that thing you're saying about how we let our accounts lay dormant and then discovered this aspect of community. It is, it's the foundation of this podcast, right? That's everybody's experience of LinkedIn, it seems like. And then at some point it opens up, and you both know that for me, it was after I left the law in October of 2021 and needed to learn how to do LinkedIn that it kind of happened for me. And it was through I think it was through starting to follow people in the sales space and that's how it's sort of opened up. But it is what you're both describing there, that where there's a thread, and it's like one person, and you just start following, and then you're in their comments section, and then there's somebody who drops something interesting in the comments, so you go check them out, and it just turns into this rabbit hole that then it really is the network effect, right? Where it just all extends outward. But Chris, how long? And we're gonna get into creativity in a variety of ways, but Chris, I don't think I know your experience with LinkedIn like prior. How long had you been on the platform?
It's look, I think similar to what Travis described, I'm gonna say probably a couple of years, but the impression was it's a digital resume service for white collar professionals and recruiters. The end. Like, that was sort of the game and the gimmick, and that wasn't me. It wasn't until I was working in tech startups that I'm like, oh, I'm writing a few little articles and stuff. I'll just throw them on LinkedIn just cause, to have some sort of record that I exist. It wasn't until COVID season 1, and I'd sort of taken myself out of a production company to start writing this book, that I started to take it a little bit more seriously. So arguably there was a year of me just like knocking stuff out before I bumped into the both of you. And if I'm honest, the style of content and delivery is very, very, very different now compared to what it was originally. Like, I know Tony and you've helped me a lot with that, actually, because my understanding and scope of LinkedIn prior to that was like, it's a professional network, it's a professional platform, therefore only present yourself professionally and publish professional content. So there's a lot of, this is how it's done, this is what I do, this is why, and almost zero sort of engagement or traction on that sort of stuff, really. And even while I'm writing a book, and yeah, it's fascinating and interesting. So it really wasn't turning over. It wasn't until we crossed paths, had a little bit of a chat and a bit of a tweak here and there, that I started to see a shift. And similarly, what you both describe in this network effect, you start identifying with values and people that are open to discussion. I think those are two things. Values is the easy one, because you identify, Tony's talking about creativity and Travis is kind of into it. That's great. But what specifically set Tony apart was that I disagreed with him on a public post twice, and we were still friends. And that's what kicked it. And I'm sure we're all aware, there's a very, very different temperament to those who just publish their opinion and go, I'm God, don't touch it. And to those who actually want to engage and go, well, what do you think? And what's it like for you? It's a very different personality type. And I'm sort of proud to say that most people in my network have that, which means you get to share that with them. I'm kind of well known for having atypical opinions on things, or a different take, but I seem to have built a community around who are open to that, want to explore it, are interested in it. And it's not just, argumentative for argumentative's sake. There's value in that discussion. So it's been at least a 2 or 3 year journey to where I am now. And I'm still learning, to be honest.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's always changing in a way that we have to keep learning as we go along. But yeah, Chris, I was thinking about that first exchange preparing for this conversation. And so, yeah, I posted a working definition of creativity and you respectfully disagreed, and then I tweaked it and then you did again. And so I published in the Creative Arena in September now, and there's a definition of creativity in there that is influenced by the conversation we had, by that exchange. And it back in November 2021, I had done Justin Welsh's operating system just like a month before, and I had chosen creativity as my niche to write about, since I'd been studying it for years and running, what was the previous iteration of the Rowdy Creative for 5 years at that point. And so it was something I could talk about all day, regardless of whether anybody was paying me to do it. And I did find myself, it's interesting, but at that point, the platform had already started to open up for me in this new way. And once I started posting about creativity, it was truly amazing to me how people like you came out of the woodwork. Is if you post that sort of stuff on Facebook or Instagram, it seemed like the only people who are going to see it are people who are already in your network. Like, it's really hard to add like-minded people or people who are interested in the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
Your stuff isn't going to find them. But LinkedIn offered that, and still does, right? Where you can find people based on what you care about. And it was the beginning of the rabbit hole, I would say, or like where things really started to go down, where you can create your network around the stuff you care about in a way that then things start cross-pollinating in ways that, I mean, it seems like all boats have been raised by like our interactions. And like we've got, I mean, there are probably another 15 to 20 people I think we could list in a kind of our small course. So this is like a nice relaxed conversation amongst friends, right? Where it's where like we've spent so much time engaging on one another's stuff over the last year that you really do get a sense of who people are, what they care about. And where should we go with it from now? Let's dig into that corner of creativity for a second, and it'll take us to your book, Chris. But so now that I found myself falling ass backward into starting a business around helping people, specifically people with law degrees, develop and implement brands and strategies on LinkedIn. I talk about choosing and owning your corner of the internet often, and the three of us chose corners in the creativity space. I think of mine as the transformational power of creativity, that by understanding it and getting better at it, developing our creative muscles, we have the ability not just to make more creative work, but to create better lives for ourselves and for our families. What about you, gents? How did you come to that as your corner? What do you think of as your corner? Let's get into that a little bit.
Travis, you jump in, Matthew.
Okay. I think as long as I can remember, and this is where we start to get into that definition of what creativity is, and in some case what it isn't. But I think that's where, even amongst the three of us, I think that when we start talking about creativity, that's even where some of the subtleties are. Is, Tony, what you say creativity is, it's not that it's untrue. It's true. And what I say it is might be true as well. But then I think what Chris even does a good job of is saying, well, yes, and it goes beyond that. It goes deeper than that. It goes wider than that. And so traditionally, creativity is thought of as the arts. Anything artistic that you can do is creative. And obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, a lot more people are noticing now that you can use creativity in a multitude of ways and across industries and in all the decisions you make. Creativity is something that you can apply to all of that. It's not just artistic. But I say that to say, growing up, that no matter what I was doing, I was always doing something artistic, whether it was drawing or being interested in words and reading and writing. photography, all these different things. When I went to college, I went after two things. I went after graphic design, and I went after music production. And so even after that, after some internships and life happens and you've got a family and you need insurance and you get a day job just to pay the bills and give you all those things that you need, and you're working a non-creative job and you just feel a little dead inside. Through all of that, I was always doing something on the side, always some kind of side hustle that, quote unquote creative. And so my path through that, my goal was always get some kind of full-time creative thing. And so that came to pass, I think 2015. I was working at a warehouse full-time, started doing part-time graphic design for a big church in the area. And that eventually led to a full-time role with them. And in that capacity, working on the creative team there, that got my hands in everything: video production, stage production, music, art, design, communication, all those different things. And so that really gave me a wealth of experience that I've now taken since then into marketing and still doing design stuff. And, so all those quote unquote creative things. But obviously there is all that. And then there's when it comes down to make a decision about your life, about a business. How can you take those ways that your mind plays in an artistic space? How can you take those things and apply them to traditionally non-creative arenas? And so that's been a really interesting thing for me to see personally. And that's one of the reasons I love Chris's interpretation of creativity, because it challenges those preconceived ideas of creativity equaling the arts.
Well, and to follow up on that real quick, did you think of, I know you started a new job. It's been what, 4 months now?
It's been May. Yeah. May.
Yeah. Did you view that as a creative act in some way, or the way you approached that process?
I probably didn't at the time. At the time, I was just looking for what I wanted and what I needed to make the next thing happen. But definitely in retrospect now, I can look back and say, okay, this is what's been historically an untraditional route to finding a job, to discovering something that's out there. A comment left on a connections post that leads to a tag, that leads to a conversation, that leads to an interview, to a job. I mean, 10 years ago, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack that just a second, right? So I'm sure this happens to you as well, but people ask me why I spend so much of my time on LinkedIn. And one of the reasons is this belief that I no longer actually need a resume, that my LinkedIn profile actually is my resume now. And if I needed to get a job tomorrow, if this business of mine crashes and burns, I'm not going to go to Indeed or LinkedIn Jobs and start applying to 30 jobs. I'm going to put an ask out to my network, letting them know where I'm at and what I'm looking for. And you are a direct example of, let's say, supporting that idea. How did that happen for you? And was that intentional, or it just kind of happened?
It was, obviously I was looking for jobs at the time. And so I had applied at that point probably to 30 or 40 different jobs, and just putting them out there. Some, if it was really a company that looked interesting to me, that lined up with my values, looked like a job that would be a really good fit, I'd spend the time. I'd customize the cover letter. I'd do all that stuff. But then I just, kind of that hit them out there with a quick apply on LinkedIn, just to get the quantity as well, for the jobs that maybe wouldn't be the perfect fit. But hey, in my mind, I hadn't told my boss yet, but in my mind, I knew there was a deadline that I'm putting in my notice here. So I've got to have something. And so that's even a whole other story with the timing of all of that, and finding the job that I ended up getting was right up to the wire after I told my boss I was quitting. But to your question, Um, it was really more random. It was a connection I had made, and I feel really bad. I was trying to look up his name before we got on here. I can't remember who it was now, but he posted something about, hey, what do you do? What are you looking for? And so I just dropped a comment on there, and he actually used to work at the company I work for now as a sales representative, I think. And he tagged his former boss and a couple other people, said, hey, you guys should connect. Travis is looking for a job. And so one of those is my now boss. And she said, hey, let's talk. We jumped in the DMs, and then that led to a formal interview. And then through the process, yeah, it landed where I am.
That's fantastic. So cool.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, circling back around to the question, which I'm sure you remember what it was.
I do. It was my corner. I think some of the posts some of my posts start with, I care about two things, and it's creativity and mental health, and I suffer from both. So that's sort of unofficially the corner. Professionally speaking, I think when it comes to creativity, it's like, well, what is it and how are we supposed to develop it? Like practically, how can we use it? Because in every industry I've worked in, and I describe my career as 15 years of hopscotch between corporate and creative. So everything from tech startups to military to medicine to the arts and film production, all these sorts of things. Creativity just is discussed a lot in a lot of different colors and tones and flavors. At the end of the day, it's like, how can we practically apply it? Inspiration's great, ideas are nice, but when I'm dealing with intelligence candidates who need to creatively problem solve a puzzle that they've never met before and lives are on the line, what skills can they practically apply that that they can replicate and then teach the other candidates, you know what I mean? So that sort of boils down, I guess, to my corner of like, here's 6 skills, they're universal, they cost you nothing. And you use them intuitively a lot of the time now. It's just identifying what they are so you can apply them with intention. I think both of you have sort of touched on it in different ways, but it's this, actually Travis did, when we talk about, the arts and creative stuff is sort of over here, but also in life, when we need to adapt. And generally we need to adapt in crisis, or when something's not right, or when a decision needs to be made. Like, how can we do that intelligently and not just pivot and not just have a reflex? How do we genuinely problem solve? How do we negotiate emotional intelligence, in times like this? So that's specifically what the work's about. And like, I guess, how did I get to this corner is sort of a funny question, because I don't know, I may or may not have been always creative. I think I was the outsider when I was 6 years old and we moved from the city to the suburbs to regional New South Wales. And I was probably the only one of 2 kids in the entire school with brown skin. So that was rough in an all white primary school in regional New South Wales. It didn't get much better from 6 to 16. So generally creatives or artists, you have a fringe personality, or you just end up on the fringes whether you like it or not. And I think that was me. But the saving grace through all of high school and education was English, because I could write what I wanted, and drama because I could say what I wanted. And even though my parents did their best to give me the proper formal education of you're going to go to uni and you're going to do this and that, it never stuck. I ended up running a kung fu school, and then I ran off to audition for acting college and didn't tell anyone, and then I got in, so then I had to go, but so rooted in all of this, and rooted in the work, and rooted in me, and rooted in is probably in all of you, is this sense that creativity matters, deeply matters, for a multitude of reasons, not for pure self-expression and mental health and all these sorts of things, but too often in life and work and relationships and schooling, it's sort of beaten down or beaten out of us, or just you're pushed away from it. And like Travis was explaining, you work these jobs that aren't really that satisfying, and you find yourself dead inside. Tony, you've got like almost the classic hero's journey of that, and then having to rediscover that light. If anything, our stories are almost polar opposites. Like I was always been the creative misfit who now is trying to like punch his way into business class to show everyone this matters. Like, you say you want this thing, this is what it does, this is how it behaves, this is why you need it, this is what you're looking for, and this is as valuable as math, science, STEM, economics, law, all of these paragons that you hold, you know, on high. Like, you, to do it better, to do it healthily, you need this creative balance, which in the moment is very much out of balance. And if this is something that I feel deeply, I'm going to assume that for every corporate individual who swears they're not creative, that's just as deeply held a view for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, if anything, if you can spark that little light to say, no, it's going to be okay, then that is work worthwhile pursuing, in my humble opinion. So that's, I think, how I've ended up on this corner at a three-way junction.
Yeah, and I have described both of you as my LinkedIn doppelganger in one way or another over the last year. But Chris, what you just said there about you and I coming at what we're doing from sort of polar opposite directions is interesting. Think back to, you mentioned that I've helped you kind of gain more traction and get more engagement on your stuff, and I want to dig into that a little bit. Where it was thinking back to this, and I think we were getting into this way back in maybe it was like February, more or less, that we were having these conversations about your content, and you were getting really frustrated and you were posting some of your frustrations. And I want to dig into this because I think there are a lot of people out there who are in similar spots, where it's like one thing that makes LinkedIn so interesting is just about everybody who's posting does have a hustle. Like, we've all got a reason, we've got something driving us to do it. And some of us are trying to feed our family, we're trying to make our living, and make our name by what we're building through LinkedIn. And that way you're framing that of, you'd always been the artist on the fringes who was then trying to punch his way into corporate via LinkedIn. Whereas I was the guy who was on the corporate path, being a corporate litigator, who then had kind of gone off the deep end, and so was doing some other stuff. And that's an interesting way of framing it, because when I started posting, I had torched my legal career. I mean, actually for the second time. The first time I'd taken a backpack and left for Bangkok with a one-way ticket in 2013, but had gone back after 4 years. But this time around, it was like, I'll say whatever I want, and so I was just leaning into my personal story and gain traction quickly, right? Where it's like, it is resonating. Like, people are dropping into the comments. We're having those exchanges, which are, you get the dopamine hit, but they're also, I think, genuinely nourishing, right? It just, having those conversations is a huge part of this deal. And what you were doing early on was, I think it is a mistake that I was making throughout my legal career, and that I think just about everybody makes when they think about what posting on LinkedIn looks like, right? And I have to post what I do and what I know, and I have to present as the professional expert. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's where I think that's where I'll dive in. I think it's you're right, it's two different approaches, and I guess you stepped into LinkedIn and shared your story, whereas I stepped into LinkedIn thinking I had to prove I was good enough. And that's a creative That's a creative thing. Like you in the creative sphere, you're aware of your skill set and how it works and everything else, and you're aware that corporate is a completely different world with a completely different set of rules, and you're also acutely aware of how they view you. And so I might, or others may, overemphasize this presentation. And to be honest, whereas Tony was sharing, I was dictative of like, this is what you need, this is how it works, this is why I do it. Don't you get it? And for some reason it didn't work or wasn't working, you know. And what Tony's tapping into in terms of, you know, having those conversations and people who are attracted to that, and that's, you know, that's something that you can talk about. You know, those stories are something that you can discuss, and LinkedIn's one of the few social media platforms that has the latitude for that. Like you mentioned before, like Instagram doesn't really have that. Twitter, forget it. Facebook, no, not really. But LinkedIn is one of the few where you have latitude to discuss and sort of have those deeper conversations, where if you're anything like us, that's what we live for. We want the big, like the meaty ideas. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out. I don't want to talk about the cat, you know, and the weather and, you know, how hot I look in a shirtless selfie. But that was definitely the mistake coming in early, and it's been a slow turn, because Tony, I remember, yeah, you remember sharing, it's like it's actually counterintuitive. Like what I think people need to know about me and the work. You know that already. Like you've done all the hard work. It's like they need to know you. They need to get to know you and why. You know, and I hate throwing out the phrase like, you know, like, know, and trust, but it's sort of along those lines. And so once I started to relax a little bit and talk about coffee, yeah, we're all laughing. And then
that's when I started following you. Right. The coffee.
Right. Oh man, I drink coffee. I'm like, yeah. Well, okay. And then it's like, oh wait, he talks about creativity too. And it's like, yeah, so if it was 80% I'm a professional, here's professional content, it got dialed right down to maybe 10-15%. And there's if not quantity of growth, I will definitely say quality, because yeah, the three of us, and we probably know, you know, probably 100 of the same people, but the quality of people you tend to attract and then have those genuine conversations with, that's what matters. But yeah, it was, I definitely, the big lesson for me at least was, if I had to swallow my pride and take my own advice, really, because if I wasn't reaching the outcome that I wanted, then what I was doing wasn't working. So I had to shift. I had to change something. And at the time, Tony had advice, and Tony seemed to be getting results. I'm like, I'll try it. I'll be uncomfortable. I'll feel like a tool for a couple of weeks and months. And of course, you never catch the big fish straight away. It never catches fire. You've actually got to give it some time. And then, yes, over time, you know, the world turns slowly, and then you start to see the engagement and the reactions and the conversations that you want. And that's when you start to get that validation of, you know, oh, people can like you and be interested in your life as well as the work. Like the work is, you're right, it's an absolute paradox that it's a professional network. It's probably the professional network, but that's not your opening line, you know.
And I still remember the first coffee shop barista post you did.
Yeah.
And that was the one. What's that?
It was Tutto Pasta, like in graffiti on the wall. Yeah. And it was mid-COVID, like season 2 COVID. Yeah.
And that was, I saw that one. I was like, all right, he's going to be all right. Okay. Once you figure that, and you see like you get the feedback from that, it's like, okay, now you
and for me, for what it was worth, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous because, you know, we can wax philosophical on all the great minds and ideas and whatever else. And I go, here, bang, selfie, helping out my friend working at his cafe. Blows up, comments, people I haven't heard from in a year, like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, what is this?
It is Well, to be honest with you, that is like the basis of my business, is like helping people with that aha moment where I started working with, I got talked into helping out this roofer through Evan Chastain, and he had been posting like on a weekly basis about roofs and what his roofing company does, right? As you would, you're a roofer. That's what you do. Our first post for him was one about coaching his son's baseball team. And his best post for the 25 this year previous had hit like 1,700 views, maybe. This first one we did went to 26,000. Like it went from like 30 reactions to 250 reactions. And it actually backfired because he had too many people bring it up when he was walking around his town. And he didn't actually want people, he didn't want to get LinkedIn famous. So it was a problem. But that dynamic of, in Chris, you mentioned creatives feeling this way, but I think it can go just for about anybody. And regardless of how creative you feel like you are, but that feeling that when we show up here, we need to show expertise. And last week's episode, I'm not sure when this one's going to drop. When I was talking
previously on Linky
Land, Doug Lawson described LinkedIn as, previously it was the conference. Like that's what it was. It was showing up, giving out your business card, shaking hands, and making small talk. And now there's also this dynamic of being the bar across the street from the conference, right? And that's where we're hanging out, right? And frankly, it's where the good stuff is happening, right? After the conference. But yeah, no, it's been cool to see your evolution, Frank, because I think it's a hard one to make. And you've done really well with it. And it's been cool to see how it's kind of changed the game for you. And well, I actually don't know the answer to this question. How has it influenced how your business has unfolded over the course of this year? Your consulting around creativity.
It's a good question. I think I'm gonna go back to quality for me, because my little niche, my little corner is a little bit more obtuse than most. Like, it's not a bread and butter service. It's not a direct, like, I will do this. It's more of a bespoke consultancy, which can be tough because I don't have 6 steps I can roll out. I don't have a 4-point plan. And then I'm also not, a giant consultancy, which is normally what the big guys go for just because they feel safe. So finding, the creative kid in the fancy hat can sometimes present as a risk. And to be honest, the stuff I get brought in for usually is they've got, the 3 standard consultants, and we've kind of got the wild card over here just to see, But what I will say is, for those that I do get brought in as the wild card, they're of a higher quality. They're generally better paid. There's the potential to have, they're the sort of positions where you would have the creative control or even the executive control to make decisions and enforce your actions, rather than just being another compliance consultant of, like, we checked the thing, we did the thing, we ticked the boxes, now pay me. And those are the sort of roles that, like, if you're hiring me or someone like me, it's because you want to do things differently. It's because you feel that you need and want change. The most recent role that I was approached for is actually for a VC investment firm in Sydney, quite well established. And so kind of left field for who I'd normally get brought in for. But they're looking to diversify a part of their business model and change. And I asked them why someone like me, because you normally go for design thinking kids or something like that. And like, no, we wanted to do something different because we need to move into this space. We tried it before. We didn't know what we didn't know. We went to a larger consultancy. You know, they gave us a report. We basically got burned because it was a report. It wasn't any action. So they recognized that they wanted to do things differently, and they were committed to actually doing something differently. So then when they finally had someone in the room who was thinking differently, was behaving differently, could demonstrate how and why it worked, and still achieve the results that they were after, and also point out the little things that they were probably unaware of. Obviously, VC investment, they're finding new innovations and deciding whether we should invest 50 million into them or whatever, or bring in foreign investors. And one of the questions I had for them was, well, how do you vet these investments? Rather than relying on an external consultancy, what process do you go through to vet whether these are suitable or not? And so gave them a quick rundown of, here's 6 criteria that I would use that you can sort of tick off whatever, but this is a pretty solid criteria. And so they found that really valuable. Now, that was forwarded to me from LinkedIn, and similar to your digital resume, that's probably how I treat it, except I've got the website as a backup. So I've got my own website. If they go to LinkedIn, or they find me on LinkedIn, they do the cursory work, and if they want the deeper dive, if they want case studies, if they want to know more about the guy behind the hat, then they'll go to the website and look at all this sort of stuff. And this particular firm had, because they wanted to know why I'd worked with New South Wales Corrective Services and things like that. So that shows that they'd done the work. That shows that LinkedIn and the flow on to the website, that sort of funnel worked. And I'll be sitting down with them next week, so that'll be an interesting discussion to have. So
nice.
To go back to your answer, yeah, for me, it's been quality over quantity. I know for other businesses and other styles, it's about getting those numbers, getting those leads, and executing on percentages. That's not my model, so I've just got to work with what I can.
Yeah. Well, and we have the shared experience of choosing a rather esoteric corner of the internet.
Yeah.
Where I know that this is something I was messaging with somebody who's an editor the other day, and she's really good. She's talking about how she has a pretty consistent flow of engagement on her stuff, but it doesn't grow in the way that she would want. And it's like,
book or video editor?
Writing. She's
right,
yeah, books. It's like, ultimately there's a question of how many people are just interested in the thing, right? And when it comes to creativity, I think it's been both. It's a specific enough corner that I think the three of us have done fairly well at getting known as somebody who talks about this stuff in public, which helps other people who are interested in that find you. But at the same time, there's a natural ceiling on how high that can go, because there are only so many people who really think about creativity at all, much less are interested in talking about it more. But Travis, that brings me to something I wanted to touch on with you, which is how somehow you just blew past me in terms of LinkedIn follower count, and you have now, you've blown past 8,000.
Man,
it's been, well, but his secret is a secret that we all lose. Like, a good way to grow is to talk about how to do well on LinkedIn, right? And I mean, it's certainly something I'm doing now. And Travis, you've become one of the practitioners of the carousel, one of the carousel artists designing them.
I have, yes.
What's your thought? Well, and that actually dovetails with a hustle you've been working on.
Yeah. So up until a month ago, let's say maybe a month and a half ago, I've been pretty consistent with posting on LinkedIn, with engaging, with growing my network of of connections like you guys that I would consider core connections. You know, guys that and ladies that I have a shorthand with, that I speak to on a regular basis. You know, we interact on each other's stuff consistently. And then, of course, you can only have so many people like that. You know, our energy, our time is limited, and so at a certain point, it starts to be followers, people who I'll engage with occasionally. Some people I don't follow back, and there's a part of me that's hard to do. It's like I want to be genuine. I want to give 100% to everybody, but you just can't. And something I'm in the middle right now of essentialism. Thank you for the recommendation. And so it's all about that, choosing what you're going to do well, and everything else you have to say no to. Your time, your energy is limited, and so in that, like you said, talking about LinkedIn and growth, that's a hot topic. Honestly, the two single biggest posts for me are the same posts. The one where I said remote work is a whatever I called it, a non-negotiable. Thank you.
Yeah.
We all saw it, yeah.
So the text post version of that 5-6 months ago, and then just a couple weeks ago, I did a carousel version of that and brought it back to life. I mean, those two single posts, over 1,000 followers from each post. They're both up there to almost 1 million views. It's not what I talk about all the time. It's not necessarily my thing. It doesn't fit my niche, and yet it's gained all this traction, which means there's, to your point, Chris, I've gained a quantity of followers, but it's probably not the quality I'm looking for. It's probably not people who are interested in what I have to offer on a regular basis. They like the post, it resonated, they hit like, they hit follow. So that's good. It's eyeballs, it's traction, it's growth, it's some social proof that LinkedIn works.
Mm.
But my struggle with that, and both times, the success feels good. Having a post do good, it feels really good. But it's hard to balance with that. And I always almost, at the end of that, I almost want to quit posting. This last time, I haven't posted much last week just because of Thanksgiving and travel and all that. But there's a part of me that's like, if that's what's successful, but it's not what I want to say every day of the week, how do I negotiate that?
That's interesting. Because I did have a follow-up of whether, to get the numbers, was it quality? But there's a second question that I actually want to ask the two of you, because you're both in the States. And there's always a lot of talk around like timing, like when's best time to post, and then engaging straight after. That's sort of half a question, but it's more, I guess, a culture question, because the US has a definite hype culture. You know, so if your friend, not necessarily your friends, but even you find something that you like and that you engage with, there's definitely an attraction to hype that up and to be a part of it and to include it and sort of boost it along. And Australia is not like that. I was talking to a few author friends of mine similarly. It's like, because I've probably got 1,000 sleeper followers in Australia, and they so seldom engage on anything, let alone my stuff. It's just we don't have that kind of culture. We're more like sit back and sort of watch. And in terms of social media, we're probably the most cynical nation in the world. Like there's 4 or 5 grains of salt first before we believe anything that's sort of going on. So I sometimes wonder, not to play my violin, like how much of culture and location plays into like the engagement game of LinkedIn. And I'd really be interested to hear both of your thoughts on that.
I don't know if I have a great answer for that. Everything for me is observational. I would say probably 85 to 90% of my closer connections are in the States. Leaving 15 to 20 that are outside of it. But within that core group, I don't think the location has anything to do with it. I think it's that, to go back to what you were talking earlier about, Chris, and what you prompted, Tony, people want to work with other people. So to bring our expert self, that plays a role in that we know what we're talking about, and whatever it is we're offering, we can back up what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, we want to connect and work with and engage with people that we can find something in common. And so I think it's less about, I feel like I can't speak to this because I don't, I obviously understand the Australian culture like you do. I am where I am, and I'm a product of where I've grown and, and
Yeah.
but it seems like it's more about who it is that you connect with and how strong that connection is versus necessarily where they are, where they're from. Random.
I would agree. It's less about where they are. When it comes to how far things are going to go, the timing does matter, I think. And the way I think about it is, am I putting this post up at a time where more people are more likely to be on the platform, right? And like my lowest performing post of the last 3 weeks is when I posted at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Like, not a bad post. It's a just fine post, but I posted it at a time where fewer people are looking at LinkedIn, right? Chris, you post a lot of your stuff at 5 p.m. Eastern. Like, that's a shit time to post if you're trying to get to American people, right? If you're trying to get to people over there, because you're getting toward the end of the workday. It's not a quality of the content thing to me. We're trying, like, if we want our stuff to move, it's like, how do we do the thing in the way that the algorithm most readily sees it as spreadable, right? And a part of that is just the AM North American time is just when more people are going to be around for a while, in a way that if I post it, then there are going to be a bunch of people who see it initially, which is going to have it keep spreading outward a little bit. So, but the other thing that comes to mind is, so like the way you're describing having 1,000 people in your network who aren't going to say anything on your stuff. A year ago, when I left law, I had 368 connections, almost entirely in law. And none of those people were Australian. And all of those people were people who were almost never going to say anything on any of my posts, right? And that's still true today. So one thing I talk to people about is thinking about growth is 2 buckets. It's like, you may have people you are targeting for your business or trying to reach for your business. But then those people are often not the people who are going to engage on your stuff, right? There's another bucket, right? And so like, you 2 dudes are part of my other bucket, right? You're part of my like engagement bucket, right? Where I'm looking to add both those. I'm looking to add people who will engage with my stuff, and I'm looking to add people who may end up being, a client for my business or a customer or what have you. And so I'm totally agnostic to geography when it comes to that, the buckets, right? There are people all over the world who can go into my engagement bucket, and frankly, it's part of what makes LinkedIn so fun, right? It's making these connections all over the world.
Sam's a good example, specifically, like, he's in New Zealand, so similar sort of time zone, but the dude is everywhere over LinkedIn, has crazy engagement, keeps getting banned. He did a little survey on the weekend about, like, if you wanted to do better on LinkedIn, if you wanted better engagement or whatever else, I'm thinking of putting a course together, like, take this survey, I might, whatever. So,
well, he messaged me saying he dropped it. I said, on a Saturday afternoon, man.
Well, it was for me. It was a Sunday. So
a Sunday,
because we're in the future.
Yeah, exactly. You're posting this. So that's an example. And that
Right.
was the first thing I said to him was like, why would you post this at the point where it is going to be seen by the fewest number of people for you?
But yeah, it's yeah. So anyway, the short story is, so I filled it out just because there's something that's missing. Like if I have a conception and like the feedback is always like, oh, content's amazing, da, 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 whatever, but it's not translating in the way that I think it should or would or could, then there's something missing. So, you know, I took Sam's survey and maybe he'll get back to me or something or whatever, I don't know. But to back a little bit to your point in terms of like, let's say trying to hit US, you know, Eastern 9 a.m. for whatever for a post. So for me, that's about 3 or 4 in the morning, which is you know, so it's a catch-22. Like I'm not going to be awake. So even if I buffer this, you know, I'm going to wake up to 12 comments or something, and then I'm not awake to respond to them, for instance, because that's the other catch of LinkedIn is like you can post whenever and get whatever engagement, but ideally you're there to engage and sort of push that snowball along. It is, to your point, Travis, is entirely observational and it's just interesting. And trying not to make an excuse, but it's just one of those little flies in my ointment sometimes.
It's 11 p.m. there right now, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. 7 a.m. here Eastern. I think maybe your optimal or the time that would make the most sense for you would be to like if you wake up at 6 or 7 a.m. or like whenever you're like ready to start rolling, that's probably your best bet. Because if you can get it up posted by like 2 p.m. Eastern, I still like it. Like 2 p.m. Eastern to me is much better than 5 p.m. Eastern. If you can.
Normally I'm up at 6 a.m. 6:30 here, and that's normally when I'm posting, and sort of through experimentation, because I found posting at 7 or 8 Oz time, you know, really isn't ideal for you guys. And so I sort of pushed it back by half an hour to an hour, and then everyone goes into daylight savings, which just throws everything out again. But yeah, so around about 6:30 at the moment is what and it seems to be going okay, you know, so until the next big post comes along that breaks the internet.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. And
Isn't it?
I have found that there is a lot of nurturing that does help. There's posts that I've put out that don't start with much engagement, but you comment on others' posts, and as soon as a comment lands on yours, you reply. And it's like you're stoking that fire. And it's a slow burn. But you can, like you said, Tony, it's the algorithm does its thing. And no, we don't all want to just have to play the algorithm all the time. But there are these things that you can do that will improve your content's performance. And so that comes down to as much time as the right time to post. If you post at the right time, but you're not there, you lose out on a lot of potential engagement.
Yeah.
If you post at a less ideal time, but you're there to stoke that fire, you can possibly get that post to do better.
And I think it also, to all three of our points, it's also what's the purpose of your life and engagement on LinkedIn. You know, it's not, for the three of us, it's not so much about the numbers to get the leads to bring the thing in. Travis, yours is a perfect example. Like, I built this community and I realized I needed a job. And so I sort of linked this thing out there, and then the network, LinkedIn provided, but it wasn't LinkedIn provided. Like, you'd done the work for months, like to curate and to put yourself out there. That's all the stuff that people don't see or don't recognize. Yeah. So then when you lean on it, it's there. And like similarly, Tony, like you stepped into this new business within the last month because you built a profile, you built relationships and connections, and gone, wow, there's a market here that I can help. Like, I've come from law. None of the lawyers I know are doing this well. They could, I'll help them. And I've talked about me before. It's not Joe Public, and I'm not selling burgers to every small business. It's sort of a higher tier, and so with that needs a little bit more patience, which admittedly isn't my strong suit. But I think being clear with the game that you're playing will alleviate will just temper a lot of your frustration if you're objective about it, for what it's worth.
So for you guys, have you found in your ideal customer, your leads that come in, are those people that engage with your content or no?
For me, with lawyers, almost entirely no.
Right.
Yeah. So, and this has been one right before that. I learned how to do LinkedIn because I was in nonprofit consulting for a minute there, right? And I built up my content so that it would show up for nonprofit leaders, so that when I slid into their DMs to ask for a call, they'd be more likely to take my call. And so same deal there. Like, no, but often they would comment on my stuff.
Yeah, not me neither. So I've got a solid community of people who are like waiting for this book to come out, and even someone lovely in the UK who's pre-ordered 3 copies and said, "Oh, I haven't even read the blurb. I just want it because you wrote it." And that's a lovely endorsement. But I don't. Interestingly, whenever I write, that first log line, that first caption, that hook of your content's got to get them in. So whenever I directly relate creativity to business, those posts blow up with engagement, but not so much with comments. It's funny. There's the video series I did a year ago, and the opening video is something about creativity and originality, and it's like, well, how does this directly relate to business? And I'm doing card tricks, and whenever I post that, massive amount of views, and those sort of posts like, where productivity, why isn't creativity productive, blows up. It might not have all the comments, but that's the one that gets the most views. So it sort of speaks to the gray silent masses who are engaging, who are watching, who are aware, and are sort of like taking in your stuff. So it doesn't always have to be like the likes, the applause, the comments, all that sort of thing. So it's really, I think you both identify something really interesting. It's like, yeah, your ideal customer is seldom the one going, wow, this changed my life,
Right. And so it's hard to do that because we see the likes and the comments and okay, that's how well I'm doing. But no, there's people in the background here that they're not liking, they're not commenting. But then you get that DM, hey,
yeah,
saw you did this, interested to learn some more.
That was where I was going to go to next. Like, and specifically, Travis, you're the prime example of this. So, I wrote the book, getting ready to publish. Oh, I need a cover, probably need to get a graphic designer. Trav, you interested? I've got a few roles. This is what I'm doing. This is the project. This is how I'm doing it. And for those at home, like Travis was the first one to actually jump in my DMs and go, hey, you got a graphic designer? Because I might know a guy. I'm like, you're a gem. Here's what I'm thinking. He's like, yeah, sure. Like tweak, done. Like 2 or 3 revisions, and we had a book cover. You know what I mean? So there's an example rather than like a tangible benefit of community and being able to work with people to achieve things. Like that's the definition of Mathilde's village.
Mm-hmm.
And what we took in terms of connection and community, that's what we're all working towards. And obviously, I've never met the 2 gentlemen on the screen, but we talk weekly, and they're always there with advice and expertise, and likewise, I'm there to offer it, if and when it's called upon. So I think that's a fairly solid measure of the health of your network. I think that gets back to quality again. You know what I mean? There's some people that I could trust in my network that, like, here's my baby. Like, who do I want to work with? And these people put their hand up and I went, yeah, I feel comfortable working with you. No question. Let's go.
Yeah. Because even though we've never met, to a degree, we know each other.
Yeah.
And so it's when you're doing this, I'm like, okay, I've got so much time, so much energy. I can only work on so many projects. Do I want to work with Chris? Yeah. I don't care what the cover's for. I want to work with you. So, it does. It speaks volumes.
And Chris, the book Applied Creativity is making its way into the world as we speak. It's been an odyssey.
It's been a saga. It has been a saga. Actually, I've got I got a proof. So here's Travis's handiwork. If you can see, probably can't see that. I'll come back. There we go. Hey,
that's better.
Nice. So Travis designed this. It looks very, very sexy. Applied Creativity, your guide to revolutionary thinking and the 6 skills to unlock your creative potential. Nice. It's currently, to cut a very long story short, I'm self-publishing, and the print-on-demand service at this time has a delay because it's getting towards Christmas, and so everyone's printing books. So I've ordered about 3 boxes for myself to sign VIP copies to people like Travis and Tony and a whole bunch of other people who I owe favors to, and anyone who pre-orders as well. That's the same deal. You get a signed copy and you get a magic gift, and I'll post it off to you wherever you are in the world. It's available on Amazon and Booktopia now. So if you were international and didn't want to wait for me, you can order it and get it straight away. The ebook's available from me. I'm currently editing the audiobook because I recorded that only a few days ago. And so it's getting there. It's being birthed inch by inch. Yeah. But it will definitely be here before Christmas. Definitely, and probably available within the next week or two properly for me to distribute.
Good stuff, man. And
thanks, bud.
I'm looking forward to getting a copy. I'll also be getting the audiobook. I'm interested to listen to that. And it's been interesting. I mean, for myself, releasing in the creative arena in September, the sort of proportion of books I've moved that have gone to LinkedIn connections relative to other people in my life. It's been a lot. Like, a lot of these books have moved because of LinkedIn, which is a little surprising. And then I think about I think I've read a half dozen books this year from other LinkedIn connections.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting dynamic, but I'm looking forward to seeing yours. I think it's going to be fun.
How did you find your launch? I ask particularly because yours seems to come out of nowhere. Because I remember previous to the Creative Arena coming out, you run another project by me, and when you said, "Oh, I'm releasing a book," I thought that was it, and then it turned out to be something else entirely.
Yeah. And
it was almost with no fanfare. It's just like, "Hey, I'm turning 40," and then, "Hey, I'm releasing a book." I'm like, "Okay," and then 2 weeks later, it was there, and that was it.
Okay, so I've got this big ass book, this memoir about this friend of mine who died, right? And I put out an ask back in February, looking for 20 people willing to read 20 pages of this manuscript and tell me whether they were interested in reading more, right? Chris, you were one of the 50 people who raised your hands for that. You were one of the 33 people, I want to say, who actually were gracious enough to read it and then provide feedback. And actually, your feedback was really useful in terms of thinking about structure and how that book has continued to take shape over this year. Mm-hmm. That one's going to see the light of day sometime. But what I realized is I really wanted to have a book in the world. So I think I posted in April or May saying, I'm going to release a book on my birthday. And at that point, I knew what the general gist of the book was. It was basically going to be a version of The War of Art, like my version of The War of Art. And so I just banged it out. And I posted maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of there. And then as I was getting up to, so like I would post things like, hey, here are a couple book designs. What do you think of the cover? That sort of thing as I was approaching it. But it's been interesting to see how people responded, where then when I put it out, people were really gracious about picking it up and then posting about it. right? Like, and both of you did that, which I'm grateful to both of you for, in a way that helped the thing spread very organically, and then also gave me more stuff to turn into content, right? Where it's like those photos of people with the book, those are invaluable to a new author, right? So I'm able to pull those together, make little collages, and then post those. And like, you know, here are some people who are kind enough to read the book and think well of it. I'm not a marketing genius, I don't think, and it certainly wasn't by design. You know, it was my goal with that first book was to have the first book exist, because I need to get to my fifth book, right? And I waited 25 years to put my first book into the world. So that's like a rambling answer on like why I don't think I provide all that much guidance on this subject beyond, I mean, I say, like, be interesting, be generous, be consistent out here, right? And I would say my approach to it has been both generous and interesting, right? And that it looks, I mean, it's me genuinely sharing this thing, not just like, hey, you need this book for this reason. I don't know if you need this book or not. It's possible the book sucks. But like, here's why this project has mattered to me. Here's what it's meant to me. And thank you for supporting, like, just me in this process, because this book wouldn't have existed without LinkedIn and the platform, frankly. So it's been a fun ride, though. I'll give you a photo for you to make you could just make a collage just with me.
Thanks, man.
Ooh,
thank you.
That's actually pretty good. I could give you like 20 pictures of me holding your book in different places. That could be.
I like that. It's funny. I thought about doing like a video journal like that, just like a day in the life of, and like in random places, and like, oh, where'd this come from, and you know, and all that sort of stuff. Or you could give me a Warhol of like you and the beard just holding the book, and then, you know, 12 different pastel versions of your head with that beard. Yes. Fantastic.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
It says that's minimal effort. You only have to take one selfie, but then and then Trav can put it through Midjourney and give me 12 Tony. Done.
There we go. That's it.
Genius.
Creativity in action.
When's your book coming out, Trav?
My book is coming out tomorrow. No, it's who knows? Eventually.
It's baking.
Eventually, yeah. Eventually, when I grow up a little bit.
Never. I think I'm regressing as I go.
Never. Peter Pan.
Right.
I feel that. Gents, we've been rolling for 75 minutes here. And I know you got to roll, Travis. So I want to touch on what you've got going on in the world real quick before we go. So Chris, you just mentioned Applied Creativity, available on Amazon, and something else I think you said was
or come to my site. It'll have all the details. So go to cssellers.com, find that /Applied Creativity, or go to LinkedIn, hit me up. I'll give you all the details.
And I'll be including links to basically all the places you can find Chris and the book in the show notes here. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to point people toward for you beyond your website, Amazon, and your LinkedIn profile?
No, I think that's self-promotional enough for the moment.
Yeah. And then Travis, you've got a business you're building. You want to talk for a second about that and where people can learn more?
Sure. So anybody that goes to my LinkedIn profile, all the links are there. Watch it. Where's the mic? And what I offer is basically design, whether it's on LinkedIn or off. For LinkedIn, if you need a new banner, if you need a carousel post, I've made quite a few now. I got some proof of concept, social proof, they work. The study that was just released a couple weeks ago now, I mean, carousels right now are a hot thing. So if you need one, hit me up. But I also offer unlimited design for a fixed monthly subscription. So any entrepreneurs, any businesses out there who don't want to hire a full-time in-house designer, but they need ongoing design work, a flat monthly fee, and I'll design unlimited revisions, unlimited requests.
Cool. And
Can recommend. Have worked with, I know I'm biased, but I will say this. Travis is professional and he's quick. And he gives you what you agreed to in the brief. I gave him 6 icons and said, can you do this? And he's like, yeah, what's wrong with the 6 you've got? I said, they belong to somebody else. So if we can just tweak them a little bit so that I don't get copyright struck. He's like, yep, sure, no worries. And then this is what I'm thinking. Bang, revisions were done. I had it in the space of 24 hours. He's clean and concise. He does what he says. And that's what you want for a professional graphic designer, regardless of whether I know him or not. And the work speaks for himself. So I recommend him. Couldn't recommend him enough.
I appreciate it, Chris.
Hey, man. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Travis will never work with me again. Temperamental, doesn't know what he wants, change the color.
Right. Why can't we do
the creatives are the worst. Yeah.
That's the nature of the beast. Occupational hazard, I imagine he runs across regularly. Travis and I have we've dabbled together as well, and I also can recommend him. But all right, gentlemen, I think we've covered pretty good ground today. Thank you both for doing this.
Thanks for having us, Tony. It's been a blast, man.
Thank you, Tony.
Yep. All right. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for the reviews on Apple Podcasts. They really are lovely to read, and they mean a lot to the podcast. So next week, we will be unleashing our first lawyer-centric episode of In Linky Land. Until then, I'll see you out there, folks.